A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child, the movie where things get a little bit weird. Hey guys, I'm Craig and welcome back to my channel. If you've been following me but are yet to hit that subscribe button, then why not hit it right now for all of my future updates. Okay, so A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5. Oh god, where do I start with this one? Okay. Let me be honest with you, I don't think this sequel is as bad as some people make it out. It does have some great moments and then it does have some what the fuck moments. Alice is back in this sequel with boyfriend Dan, and even though Dan does have an amazing death scene in this movie, at least they didn't kill off main protagonist Alice within the first 15 minutes like they did with Kristen in the last movie. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the things that I like in this movie before I get onto the negatives. So let's start with Dan's death scene. This was an incredible death scene. It was gory, it was painful, it was creative. It was labeled as a disturbing death scene to the point where the death scene, it had to be cut out and trimmed down, which is just crazy. Dan ends up getting killed when he jumps on a motorbike, and this motorbike, it literally turns into Freddy, and then all of these wires, they start entering Dan's body and through his hand, and then fuel gets injected all through his body, which results in Dan being cooked from the inside out, and all of his skin starts to melt and burn off, turning Dan into this burnt skeleton carcass while stuck on this motorbike. It's amazing, I absolutely love it. Now, the uncut version, it actually is on YouTube somewhere if you want to search for it. In fact, another death scene which was dramatically cut was Greta's death, when Freddy pops up as this chef and he then starts to feed Greta her own guts from her stomach, which is quite vile and disgusting, but once again, it's creative. Now, the cut version that we get to see, it makes the scene look very rushed and it doesn't have the same impact. It definitely didn't help this movie having a lot of these scenes cut out. Alice as a character in this movie is great. She didn't revert back to her shy self. She stayed as this strong character that we left with at the end of Nightmare 4. Now, I liked the way they brought Freddy back in this movie. I mean, it was a little bit confusing at first, I will admit, but it was still great. I mean, Alice, she ends up having this nightmare where she sees Amanda Kruger giving birth to a baby Freddy, which looks pretty cool and quite messed up. Now, baby Freddy, he then runs back to the chapel where Alice defeated him in the last movie, and then this baby Freddy lets off this howling scream before this chapel starts ripping itself apart, and we see the baby Freddy slowly grow back into adult Freddy, and I thought it was pretty cool and it was really dramatic. The other thing that I did like about this movie is the way Freddy uses Alice's unborn baby's dreams to get to her and her friends. I thought it was a pretty unique idea for its time, and it created the whole sense of, are we in a dream now or not? I also like the music that they used in the movie. It felt very gothic and quite Halloweeny, and it created a good atmosphere throughout the entire movie, which is what is needed in an Elm Street film. Okay, now onto the negatives of this movie, and I'm going to start with Mark's death scene, where he ends up being sucked into a comic book when he falls asleep. Now, on paper, this could have been a great nightmare and a great kill scene, but the makers of this movie, they ended up ruining the whole thing with cheesiness. Like, why do they do it? It doesn't work in a Freddy film. I don't like it in horror films, full stop, but a Freddy film, really? Freddy is supposed to be dark and evil, and I just can't stand it. Now, Mark ends up shooting Freddy with these powerful weapons, and then Freddy pops back up as this Super Freddy with all of this cheesy music. Mark then turns into this paper machete 2D thing that Freddy starts ripping apart, which ends up resulting in Mark's death. Now, like I said, this could have actually been a really cool scene if they didn't turn it into this massive cheese fest. There are moments in this movie where I get really bored. It's like we get a really good nightmare scene and then we just get a load of dialogue that goes on, and some of it seems really pointless. I hated the way the writers were trying to introduce a storyline where Dan's parents, they were thinking that Alice was losing her mind or having some sort of a breakdown after Dan's death, and they wanted to take the baby when it is born. Now, it had no reason to be in the movie, it didn't add anything to the main storyline, so it was just total pointlessness. I really didn't like Yvonne's character. I found her character to be quite annoying in certain parts of this movie, and I really would have actually preferred Yvonne's character to die rather than Greta. Now, the only reason why Yvonne survived this movie, let's face it, it's because they needed a character to be able to find Amanda Kruger and free Amanda's soul while Alice was having a final showdown with Freddy. And honestly, I reckon Greta would have been so much better for this role rather than Yvonne, but that's just my opinion. I personally found Greta a lot more interesting. I found her whole storyline interesting with her interfering parents and her mother who keeps on at her about all these diets, and I just felt there was a lot more depth with Greta and more likability than Yvonne. This is another one of those nightmare movies that drives me a little bit mad because it had the potential to be an amazing sequel, because there are parts in this movie where when they do get it right, it blows you out of the park, and I give you Dan's death as an example. But when they get it wrong or execute certain things wrong, it's mega shit, mega boring. And I will admit, I have fallen asleep in this movie usually around the halfway mark, and then I've usually then jumped back out of my sleep when some of the more good stuff is back on. How is Freddy defeated in this movie? Well, Jacob, Alice's unborn child who appears in some of her dreams, he pretty much spews or barfs at Freddy, causing the three souls of Alice's friends to burst out of Freddy's body. And this is actually a little bit of a messed up scene, especially the bit where Freddy starts coming out of Alice's face and her body, and their faces are like conjoined together. It looks so grim and disgusting, but I love it. It was very reminiscent of Nightmare 2 when Freddy came out of Jesse's body, but I do think Nightmare 2 did this one better. Overall, it's not a bad storyline. I mean, Amanda Kruger, she's got to be saved from this tower, and you've got Alice's unborn baby having the nightmares. It's interesting seeing flashbacks to the time where Amanda Kruger is trapped and then raped by like 100 maniacs in the asylum. There's just something missing from this movie, and I can never quite put my finger on it. But for me personally, this movie, it might have like one fantastic death scene and one or two okay moments, but this movie is a little bit of a flop for me. I don't often go back and rewatch this sequel as much as the others. I rewatched it earlier this year with my other half as he had never seen this sequel before, and before then I actually couldn't tell you the last time when I watched it. As I said earlier, this is still not the worst sequel in the whole Elm Street universe, but I can see why it's not on many people's favourites, entries. There's probably a whole lot of people out there who maybe have a little bit of love for this movie. Maybe it's even got a cult following like Nightmare 2 has. Who knows? So on that note, I would like to hear all of your thoughts about A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child. Let me know in the comments box below what you think of this movie. Are you a fan or are you a hater on this one? Or are you a little bit like me and get frustrated on what could have been a fantastic sequel? Get typing, guys, and let me know in the comments box below. Okay, well, we've reached the end of this movie review. Be sure to hit that subscribe button for future updates, and guys, thank you all for watching today. I will see you all again very, very soon.